And I heard somebody on Twitter, and this kind of pisses me off. I'm gonna find it and share it, man. It's really, and my boy Omar Kazi tweeted it, and that a huge fan, Omar Kazi. I found out about him on the Third Row podcast with Tesla. So, I don't know how he feels about it, but I didn't like this tweet. And I've retweeted stuff where I'm like, oh shoot, that was a bad retweet. I retweeted something while I'm looking for this about something about Zelensky being a hero early on in Ukraine. I'm like, that was a cringe retweet. But I mean, if it was something about him like being in the bunker, with his people, and Trudeau was against the people. And it's hard to know what happened if Zelensky really is kind of like in the bunker with his people to as much as he can as being the highest figure in Ukraine. That is courage. If he's really in that kind of danger, that is courage. But even looking back at it, I'm like, that's kind of cringe. I kind of wish I didn't retweet that one, but you can't win them all. So here's the tweet. Let me share it real quick. It's a side note. See, that's the thing with drinking coffee late. Now I'm gonna be now I'm gonna be up late. But it's all good. Imagine if I didn't have the coffee, how sleepy this would sound. But here's a tweet. If you can see this, let me make sure you can see the screen here. Brian Deese, White House Director of the National Economic Council. So here's what I'm not happy about. I'm not happy with this, Brian. Brian, so Brian tweets, many people don't realize this, but because of historically strong economic growth and policy choices, the deficit last year actually fell by 360 billion. And maybe even more surprising, we're on track to see the federal deficit fall by 1 trillion this year, the largest nominal decline ever. So that sounds good. And it's all factual. I know that's factual stuff. So my expectations are low. When we start with facts, I'm thank you God. At least we're starting with facts. But my question was, what was the point of that? I didn't understand what the point was. Like, Brian, no, I seriously, I wish I could ask him, like, what's your point, Brian? Like, I don't understand. What are you saying? Okay, here's what I mean. The deficit is really just the difference between what you're spending and how much revenue you got. And the government basically gets revenue from taxes. So the difference between spending and basically taxation is decreasing. So that's what he's saying with the deficit here. The deficit fell by 360 billion. On track to see the federal deficit fall by 1 trillion this year. This is great. That is actually great. But what is your point though? Because we're borrowing. That's not, so there's the difference here that I think he's trying to do a slight of, I'm not saying that, but here the difference that he didn't bring up was the deficit is not the debt. So that it's like, here's what it's like. It's like you are doing your household budget. The deficit is, I've got, I'm spending $1,000 on bills, and my income is 1,200. And so, maybe next month you're like, okay, my income's 1,300, and I only spent 900 on all my household bills. So my deficit's lower. It doesn't mean it's negative. It could be, it doesn't mean it's positive. It could be negative and still go down lower. But the problem is, if you're racking up credit card debt, that's a problem. And that's not calculated in the deficit. So the debt is going up. And Trump was a part of that. That's one of the biggest beefs I have with Trump. Marjorie Taylor Greene agrees with that too, against Trump. But we're borrowing money at a crazy level. And then we also added money, basically printed money. I didn't say the word printed because we're not literally printing it, but we're adding money to circulation. Something like 80% of the money in circulation was added in last couple years. So this deficit doesn't mean anything if you're racking up credit card bills and you're printing money in the back room so that the money doesn't isn't worth as much. I digress. I didn't even plan on doing that, but I don't even know how I got into that tangent there. But I thought it was interesting.